I've been waiting, sunshine, while you playing with my head on the time. You go way out of line.
Hey, it's your girl Serene. Welcome back to my channel. So today we about to get into this trial. So basically I'm covering two trials right now. The Ahmaud Arbery trial, and I'm also covering the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. First off, okay, I will be looking down at notes because, yeah. So, for those who do not know who Kyle Rittenhouse is, he is the gentleman who killed two white gentlemen and injured another white gentleman in the riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is following the Jacob Blake shooting. Jacob Blake was shot by the police and killed. And after this happened, protests and rioting broke out afterwards. During those rioting, that's when the Kyle Rittenhouse ended up shooting and killing two gentlemen and injuring another one. But both of them were there all of the same race, Caucasian. However, they were out there because of the Jacob Blake shooting. Jacob Blake shooting. Moving along. First and foremost, Kyle Rittenhouse at the time of the shooting, he was only 17 years old, which means legally he was not supposed to be, he was not able to own his own gun. So, a friend of his who was also dating his sister at the time, his name Dominic Black. So Dominic Black is the one who bought the gun, had it in his name, and according to him, the agreement was the gun will maintain being at his stepfather home, locked away in a gun cabinet until he was old enough to own a gun, basically. Now, the jury and everything for this trial was picked all in one day and went into starting immediately. They had to me, in my opinion, the judge, I don't think he liked the prosecutor. I'm gonna put it out there. I think he is prejudiced against the prosecutor. I think he doing everything he can to spite the man, whether it's right or wrong, or for the cause, right or wrong or not. I think he has his own personal dislike and distaste for the protesters and rioters. He ruled that none of the deceased can be called victims during the trial, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, because that's what they are. He also denied the prosecution 2 videos and a photo of Kyle Rittenhouse before the incident happened being entered into court. Now, the first video that was denied was a video of him and his friend, Dominic Black, and another gentleman sitting on a car watching I believe it was a CVS, if I'm not mistaken. Either way it goes, a drugstore, being basically raided by what you would call rioters or whatever, and him saying clear as day on the video, I wish I had my AR, I will open up and shoot all of them. That's what he said on there. Plain as day. The second video is of his sister having a one-on-one fight with another Caucasian female, and him actually jumping in the fight and attacking said female that his sister was fighting. Yeah. I mean, attacked the female like she was a boy. Was punching her and everything. Sure was. And the picture that was denied was of him in a bar, which he ain't old enough to be at drinking, with his mother, posing and shaking the hands of members of the Proud Boys. And if you don't know what that is, that's like the new KKK. Yes, for the 2000s. They not called KKK no more. They called the Proud Boys. Next, after denying all that, I also don't like the fact that he keeps interrupting the prosecution in the middle of his presenting his case. If he, let me try to calm down, Walter, because let me tell you something. The judge done frustrated me through this process. You really cannot help but to see his biasness. I'm sorry, like, ain't it a way to get him off the case when clearly they biased in the case? Anywho, if you know the answer to that, comment down below. I would love to know. Seriously, because I'm curious. I'm a researcher, look it up myself. Because I just don't feel he should have been left on this case. Because I really feel he has an issue with the prosecutor. He even went into a tirade about the media. How he don't like the media, and it's terrible. I don't like it, and I feel it's just absolutely terrible. Anywho, so the first witness they put on for the trial was Dominic Black, who explained that Cal gave him the money to purchase the gun. If he did purchase it in his name, since Cal was not old enough to have a gun. They made the agreement that the gun will stay at his stepfather's home until he was old enough to own a gun. And that's where the gun did stay. He did state that they did use it for target practice. I believe the day he bought it, and maybe a couple of times after that. So it sounds as though he probably handled that gun maybe 3 times before he takes it down to this riot thing. According to him and Cal was asked by the owners of what is called car stores to help protect their business because one of their car lots was burned down. Like seriously, the whole car lot was burned down. The cars in the lot and everything burned down. And apparently they had 2 more lots there. Or I might be mistaken. It may be only 2 lots and one of them got burned down, which left one that wasn't burned down. One or the other. Either way it go. They went down in the daytime and helped clean graffiti off of one of the schools that Dominic Black went to because he actually lived in Kenosha with his stepfather. Cal lives in Illinois. He don't even live in Wisconsin. He lives in Illinois. But they saying that he worked as a lifeguard in Wisconsin, in the Kenosha area. But he didn't live there. I think they said his father lives there, but he don't live there. Either way it go. They went down there that day. They scrubbed graffiti off of one of the schools. I believe they made maybe like 3 trips to Dominic's house before they ended up talking to another gentleman who actually did work for car stores. And that's how they met the owner who asked them to help protect his place of business. So that's how they end up in Kenosha that night. The shootings happen. According to Dominic Black, his father took all of the weapons out of the out of the gun cabinet because he was afraid that if someone tried to break into their home, so many words. So he took all the guns out the cabinet, but left them in the basement. But whatever. Anywho, he said while they were there getting prepared to leave, that's when he noticed Kyle come out of the basement with his AR-15, because this is what he was carrying. But he didn't really think nothing about it because his mind was in a million one places. And he pretty much was saying that basically he was just scared about where they were going and what they were going into. That's what his mind was on, not really paying attention to the fact that Kyle had his gun, or the fact Kyle got in the car with the gun, or the fact that Kyle was traveling down there with him with the gun. Yeah, he according to him, he didn't pay attention to none of that. And keep in mind, Dominic Black is facing charges for providing the weapon to a minor. Anywho, moving along, the next witness was a Corey Washington. Basically, he described himself as a social media influencer. Basically, he just, ride around town doing different reports on things. Anywho, this night he was there to record the happenings of the protests and the riots. According to him, he can tell in the beginning of the day, which would have been the day after the Jacob Blake shooting, it was a organized protest. He said you could tell it was very organized, and that everyone was listening to the instructions and followed the instructions. And they had a very successful, no-issue march protest. He said by the end of the night, once it was all over, the organizing people pretty much were left, and he started seeing faces come into the crowd that he had never seen before. He figured they were out-of-town people. And it got to the point sometime in the night where he realized a lot of them was just opportunists. They wasn't there because of what had happened to Jacob Black. They was there just to see what they can get into for their own selfish need to do whatever it is they was doing outside of it. Wasn't no real, you're not here to really protest type of situation, is what he was saying in his testimony. So he said what made Kyle Rittenhouse stick out to him was the fact that he didn't understand why he was walking around with gloves. He did have blue medical gloves on the whole time, but of course Corey Washington wasn't around at the time where he was telling people he was an EMT, which he's not, but this is what he was telling people. And he called himself being there to help medical people that's being injured, which made no sense to me neither. But anywho, he said that's what made him stand out to him. The fact that he had gloves on and he was chain smoking cigarettes. He said he just looked very nervous to him, and he had a baby face. He looked like a young kid, like he was too young to be out there with that gun. So that is what made him notice him and remember that he noticed him. So later on in the night, when he came running past him with a fire extinguisher in one hand and a gun in the other, he decided to follow him because maybe he knew something, he didn't know, and he was going to check out something that might have been going on at the time when he ran by. And that's why he ended up following behind him and ended up recording the things that happened after that. Is pretty much what he was saying. The next witness was a detective, and basically for him, his testimony was basic. The police had, I'm not sorry, the FBI had a, like, I think they call it an aerial view when they record from the helicopters down upon us. You could see their video. He helped explain who was who on there and what was happening on those videos. But yeah, that's what the detective did, and there was another officer who served search warrants for phones and stuff. He was questioned about his search warrants for the phones and other stuff. Basically, just regular police questions. So after that, we get a reporter, and let me stress by saying he's a conservative reporter. And the reason I'm stressing this is because the whole time the prosecution, first off, this is the prosecution case. I don't know if I said in the beginning, but these are witnesses the prosecution called up here. And this witness, you can tell everything he was saying, he was trying to find a way to word it where it did not hurt Kyle Rittenhouse. Basically, he really stopped and thought about every response he was going to give, almost to the point where you could tell he really didn't want to testify for the prosecution, which I don't know how that works, but either way it go, the prosecutor had to really prove his point that he was not telling the full truth about his answers to some of his questions. And unfortunately for the reporter, he did a lot of reports and interviews. And so he was able to play back them interviews of what he said that he's now today in court changing his mind on. After that, the next witness they called was a volunteer guard that was working with Cal, but he had never met him until that night. He discussed how within his group they all felt he also looked very young in the face, but it was an assumption that he was like 19 years old. He's not sure how the assumption came about or where they got the info from, but that's what was discussed in this group he was standing in. Excuse me. Now, he does say, which to me is very important, he does say that it was a point that came where he had to tell Cal not to interact with the writers. Don't say anything to him because it could be misconstrued as him trying to be confrontational towards them. Because one example is, I guess, a female writer walked by and said something to him, and he said, well, I love you too, miss. You're being condescending at this point. So he told him not to do things like that, and pretty much in so many words, just keep your mouth shut, I don't think he really listened. Because going back to the conservative reporter, he actually had on video, it was 3 gentlemen there who he was questioning because they were upset with Cal Rittenhouse. And, it was a point where Rittenhouse and the 3 gentlemen had got into a verbal altercation. And he asked them why were they so angry with Kyle Rittenhouse. And they all explained that at one point they was jumping up and down on some cars and he basically pointed his gun at them. The prosecution also went into asking him, who, by the way, he served, I want to say they said Army. I'm not 100% sure. I will have to go back to see. But he has some type of training for the weapon he had, which he did have a AR-15 and he had a pistol. Both on him when he went down to help the prosecution asked him flat out, when you got down there, how did you plan on trying to get people not to do things they shouldn't be doing? And he was like, that in his head, they figured they would just tell him, can't you stop? But when they got there, they pretty much didn't have to say anything to anybody, because just standing there with their guns seemed to deter people from trying to do things. So he asked them, well, if they did it anyway, would you had used your gun to shoot them for destroying property? And he said no. He wouldn't have done that, because of the simple fact, you know, they are trained to understand that life is more important than anything else. So that's pretty much where we're at with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And we will continue on through it. But just for some personal notes from myself watching the trial, yeah, totally feel the judge is biased. I totally feel the judge has a problem with the prosecutor. And I'm talking about, I think they might have had a problem from a different case, because he mentioned something about a case that he worked with this prosecutor that ended up getting overturned. Anyway, I also don't like the fact that if you ask me, he does a lot of joking with the jurors too. We in the middle of a serious trial. But anywho, I also don't want to forget that today they actually dismissed a juror, juror number 7, because he made a very, if you ask me, discriminating, inappropriate, and downright ignorant, as far as I'm concerned, joke about Jacob Black. And apparently the joke was supposed to have been something about, why did the police only shoot him 7 times? And apparently it's because they ran out of bullets. The joke was along the lines of this saying. But when the judge brought the juror in to explain and to see if he would repeat the joke he said to the bailiff, he refused to go on the record with the joke. Which the judge, in defense, agrees with the prosecution. They should be dismissed, and the judge dismissed them. So it should be another juror to step in for juror number 7 tomorrow. Well, I think that they did today. My bad. Yeah. I don't know about this case. I usually can have a pretty strong case, feeling on a case of where it's going, but with this one, I don't know. It's too many bias and prejudiceness in, and I'm talking about as far as the judge choice of prosecution. You know, the 2 videos and the picture that I discussed earlier that he denied entry, his whole thing was it was irrelevant to what they was there for. And I don't understand how he feel that way. How possibly can it be irrelevant when this boy is stating how he wants to open up and shoot with his AR? This sounds like an eagerness to do it to me. How is it not relevant to his state of mind towards what was happening in the city at the time, for deflect even more so where his state of mind that you posing and taking pictures with the Proud Boys? Come on now. You know. Oh, Lord. That's all I'm going to say right now for the Kyle Rittenhouse versus the state of Minnesota. And I will be back with a further update in a couple of days. So, if you made it to the end of my video, thank you. Please go ahead and do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, like button, share, comment, talk to a sister. I will talk back. And thank you. Have a wonderful day.
I swear.